John Calvin's Institutes of the Christian Religion is considered one of the most significant theological works in Christian history. Written as a defense of Protestant beliefs, it provided a structured and systematic explanation of Christian doctrine, making theology more accessible to both scholars and ordinary believers. Originally published in 1536 and expanded over time, the Institutes became a foundational text for Reformed theology, shaping the beliefs and practices of countless Protestant communities. One of Calvin's key contributions was his emphasis on the sovereignty of God. He argued that God's will governs all aspects of life, including salvation, which he explained through the doctrine of predestination. This concept, though controversial, reinforced the idea that salvation is entirely dependent on God's grace rather than human effort. Calvin's interpretation of divine sovereignty profoundly influenced later Protestant movements and remains a central tenet of Reformed theology. Another significant aspect of Calvin's work was his approach to Scripture. He championed the idea that the Bible is the ultimate authority in matters of faith and practice. Unlike the Catholic tradition, which emphasized church authority and tradition, Calvin insisted that Scripture alone should guide Christian belief. This principle, known as sola scriptura, became one of the defining pillars of the Protestant Reformation and continues to shape Protestant theology today. Calvin also redefined the role of the church in society. He believed that a well-ordered church should function with a clear system of governance, including pastors, elders, teachers, and deacons. His model of church leadership, outlined in the Institutes, became a blueprint for many Reformed churches and influenced the development of Presbyterian and Congregationalist traditions. By structuring church leadership in a way that emphasized collective decision-making, Calvin's ideas contributed to the emergence of more democratic governance in both religious and political contexts. Ultimately, Institutes of the Christian Religion was more than just a theological treatise, it was a guide for Christian living. Calvin sought to help believers understand their faith intellectually while also encouraging them to live according to God's will. His work inspired not only theologians but also lay people who sought a deeper connection with God through knowledge and devotion. Through his systematic and comprehensive approach, Calvin left a lasting legacy that continues to influence Protestant theology and Christian thought worldwide. Educational reforms and the Academy of Geneva. John Calvin was a firm believer in the power of education as a means of strengthening faith and ensuring the spread of Reformed theology. He saw education as essential not only for the clergy but also for ordinary believers, equipping them with the knowledge necessary to understand Scripture and live according to Christian principles. This conviction led him to establish a structured educational system in Geneva, which would have a profound impact on Protestant communities throughout Europe. In 1559, Calvin founded the Academy of Geneva, an institution designed to train pastors, theologians, and scholars in Reformed doctrine. The Academy served as a theological seminary and a general school, offering both religious and secular education. Students were instructed in biblical studies, classical languages, philosophy, and the humanities, ensuring that they were well prepared to defend and spread the Reformed faith. The Academy of Geneva quickly gained a reputation as a center of learning and theological excellence. Many of its graduates became influential figures, carrying Calvin's teachings to France, Scotland, the Netherlands, and other parts of Europe. Among its most famous students was John Knox, who played a crucial role in the development of Presbyterianism in Scotland. Through the Academy, Calvin ensured that his theological ideas would continue to shape the future of Protestantism long after his death. Beyond training ministers, Calvin's educational reforms also contributed to a broader culture of literacy and intellectual engagement. Unlike the Catholic Church, which often limited biblical interpretation to clergy, Calvin encouraged ordinary believers to read and interpret the Bible for themselves. This emphasis on literacy helped promote widespread education among Protestant communities, leading to higher levels of literacy in Reformed regions compared to their Catholic counterparts. The Academy of Geneva also laid the groundwork for the modern university system by emphasizing structured education, academic excellence, and the integration of religious and secular knowledge. It inspired the creation of Protestant universities across Europe, including institutions in the Netherlands, Germany, and the American colonies. Today, its legacy can be seen in the emphasis on critical thinking and theological training in many modern seminaries and universities. Promotion of church discipline and moral order. Calvin's leadership in Geneva was marked by his efforts to establish a disciplined and morally upright society. He believed that a Christian community should reflect the teachings of Scripture in all aspects of life, which led him to implement strict moral and social reforms. Although his governance was sometimes criticized as harsh, it created a structured and ethical society that influenced later notions of civic responsibility and governance. One of the key aspects of Calvin's moral reforms was the consistory, a church council composed of pastors and elders responsible for maintaining religious discipline in Geneva. The consistory monitored the behavior of citizens, ensuring that they adhered to biblical principles in their personal and public lives. It had the authority to impose penalties for actions such as blasphemy, adultery, drunkenness, and neglect of church attendance. Calvin's strict enforcement of moral laws was based on his belief that Christianity should shape all aspects of society, not just individual faith. He saw Geneva as a model Christian city, where citizens would live in harmony under God's law. His vision was influenced by the biblical idea of a covenant community, in which both individuals and society as a whole were accountable to God. Although his methods were strict, Calvin's emphasis on moral integrity and social responsibility helped create a sense of order and stability in Geneva. His teachings promoted hard work, honesty, and personal discipline, values that later became associated with the Protestant work ethic. These ideals played a significant role in shaping economic and social development in Protestant regions, influencing modern capitalism and civic duty. Ultimately, Calvin's reforms in Geneva were not merely about control, they were about building a society based on righteousness and justice. While some viewed his governance as overly rigid, others recognized that his efforts laid the foundation for ethical leadership, responsible governance, and the integration of faith and public life. His influence extended beyond Geneva, inspiring future Protestant communities to create structured, disciplined, and morally upright societies. The American founding fathers were deeply influenced by Calvinist principles, particularly regarding the separation of church and state. The idea that religious institutions should be independent from government control played a crucial role in shaping the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which guarantees religious freedom. Calvin's legacy in this area is evident in the way modern democracies balance religion and government, ensuring that faith remains a personal and communal matter rather than a state-enforced doctrine. Influence on democracy and modern work ethic. Calvin's theological emphasis on equality before God and individual responsibility had a profound impact on the development of democratic ideals. He believed that all people, regardless of social status, were accountable to God and had a role to play in society. This belief challenged the traditional hierarchical structures of medieval Europe, where kings and clergy held unchecked power. His system of church governance, which emphasized collective leadership and accountability, inspired early democratic models. The Presbyterian system, in which elders are elected to lead congregations, mirrored the principles of representative government. This idea influenced political thinkers such as John Locke, whose writings on democracy and governance helped shape modern democratic institutions. Another key area of Calvin's influence was the Protestant work ethic, a concept later explored by sociologist Max Weber. Calvin taught that work was a form of worship and that diligence, discipline, and stewardship were signs of a faithful life. Unlike medieval Catholic teachings that often emphasized the spiritual superiority of monastic life, Calvin's theology affirmed that all professions and vocations were valuable in God's eyes. This emphasis on hard work and personal responsibility became deeply ingrained in societies influenced by Calvinism, particularly in Switzerland, the Netherlands, Scotland, and later the United States. It contributed to the rise of capitalism, as individuals were encouraged to pursue economic success not for personal gain alone, but as a sign of divine blessing and a means of serving the community. Calvin's ideas on stewardship also promoted financial responsibility and ethical business practices. He discouraged wastefulness and luxury, encouraging believers to reinvest their earnings into productive ventures. This mindset played a crucial role in shaping the economies of Protestant nations, where industry, trade, and innovation flourished under the belief that work and wealth should be used for the greater good. In the broader sense, Calvin's emphasis on education, self-discipline, and civic responsibility helped shape modern Western societies. His teachings encouraged active participation in both religious and civic life, reinforcing the importance of integrity, accountability, and hard work, values that continue to influence cultures shaped by Protestant traditions. John Calvin's impact on theology, society, and governance is undeniable. His meticulous theological writings, particularly Institutes of the Christian Religion, provided a systematic foundation for Reformed Christianity and continue to influence Christian thought today. Through his establishment of the Academy of Geneva, he advanced education and helped shape the intellectual landscape of Protestant Europe, ensuring that future generations of pastors, scholars, and leaders would carry on his teachings. Calvin's strict but structured approach to church discipline and moral order laid the groundwork for a society built on accountability, integrity, and social responsibility. His governance in Geneva, though at times rigid, reflected his deep conviction that a Christian community should live according to biblical principles. The emphasis he placed on morality, diligence, and ethical living contributed to the development of what later became known as the Protestant work ethic, shaping economic and social structures in many Western nations. Despite his enforcement of strict religious policies, Calvin's advocacy for a self-governing church indirectly contributed to later discussions on religious freedom and the separation of church and state. His insistence that church leadership should remain independent from political rulers influenced the evolution of modern religious autonomy and, ultimately, the democratic values embraced by many nations. His model of church governance by elected elders served as an early inspiration for representative government and played a crucial role in shaping democratic principles. From theology to education, from moral discipline to economic thought, Calvin's ideas extended far beyond his lifetime. Whether through his contributions to Reformed theology, his impact on Western democracy, or his influence on the economic and social fabric of Protestant societies, his legacy remains deeply embedded in the foundations of modern civilization. While his leadership was often controversial, his work continues to shape religious and secular thought, leaving a lasting mark on history.